There are a lot of different kinds of brushes in Illustrator, but you can actually create your own or even modify the existing ones. So we're going to explore what we can do with brushes in this next exercise. Well, first of all, let's open up our brushes panel. I'm just going to pull this out and expand it. And that way I can really see all the brushes that are here. And I've added a few in. You're going to learn how you'll be able to add your own in as well. But let's get started with some of the different options with brushes. So first of all, I'm going to select some brushes. And I've got a couple different brushes in here that are scatter brushes. And there's one and here's another. And they're actually almost the same brush with just different settings. And if I were to double click on the brush, it opens up the options. And here's that scatter brush options. It has a name. I could rename it if I wanted to. And it has some random options in there as well. Oh, you know what? Let me go back and reset this because I realized this is using the other one. So I want this one. Go ahead and double click on it. There we go. And it has some options in there. Now, even though nothing's selected, there are 3 different objects that are all associated with this brush, and so I can actually use my preview command. So as I'm making changes, I can see what's going on. And one of the things that we can do is we can change things like the size. You can see how you can control what's the largest size and how big things might get. So it's that variation. And we can also do some things with the spacing and modify these. Creates an interesting effect there. We've got some scatter options, like how far apart are they going to be as well, or how far away from the original path, and then some rotation. And so you can just start changing some of these options, and we have relative to the page or path. Another feature that you often see is working with the colorization. And right now there's no colorization, so it's always going to pull it in from this color. But if I were to choose tint or one of these other options, I can actually have it based on whatever the stroke color is going to be. And then there's also an option for hue shift where we can have it shift to a different color. I'm going to go ahead and choose tint, click on OK. And then we have an option to leave strokes or apply strokes. And so even though nothing's selected, we can just choose to leave strokes, and that means they're going to return back to the way we started, or we can apply to strokes, and all those new changes in the brush definition are going to be in effect. There we go. If I switch this to, let's say, hue shift, you can see a slightly different option. And I do need to reselect them in order to change the color. But you can see it's actually playing a bit of an overlay on it as opposed to a tint. So there's some different choices in there that you can experiment with. And if I were to go ahead and make some changes and actually start randomly changing these around again, making them bigger, and change this back to none, and click on OK and choose leave strokes, you can see how it doesn't affect these. However, when I go to the next object, or even when I click on one of these objects that's already existed and I apply it, you can see how it resets the information. Yeah. Now that was a scatter brush, and if we open up different kinds of brushes, we're going to get slightly different options. And if you double click on this brush, it's an art brush, and you're actually going to get some options for working with the art brush. And if I double click, here's another art brush that we have. We have a bristle brush. We double click, we get some options for bristle brushes for experimenting. And we also have some calligraphic brushes, some options for experimenting with that. I have a pattern brush in here. And so depending on the type of brush you get open up, you're going to have slightly different options. Some of them all have the same thing with colorization. Some have some features that you can experiment with. And there's actually 5 different types of brushes that you can change. Okay, the next thing we're going to work with is an art brush. And I've got 2 different art brushes in here. And I want to show you this first one. We click on it. For this one, I'm going to make a little bit taller or thicker. Maybe that's a little too thick, but like a little thicker so you can see it. But as we're going through, you can actually see this brush. And I want you to show you something, is the fact that it's stretching only a certain area of the brush, not all of it. If I were to change this to stretch scale proportionally or stretch fit length, right, remove that in, click on OK, apply to stroke, then what happens is it's actually going to start stretching all the elements, not just the it's actually going to stretch all the elements, not just the pieces of it. There's that stretch between. Okay, so now we're going to apply this and create our own options. And we can use something here with this flower pot. So I'm going to start by, first of all, adding in the entire flower pot, just bringing that in. And just by dragging in your artwork, you can create a brush. And you can see the different types of brushes that we can create. Let's create an art brush. Now when I create an art brush, I could give it a name. And I can choose how it's going to size, right? There's some options with the width. Maybe make it just a little smaller there. And how it's going to scale. And we're going to do the stretch. Now for the stretch, I want to make sure I have the arrow going the right direction. This has to do with when I draw a line, which way is it pointing? It's going to be pointing this way. And then I'm going to change the area that's allowed to stretch. And really all I want to stretch is the area where that green line is. Let me pull this up again. I still have some options for colorization if I want to do that, and I have some options for flipping. Let's go ahead and click on OK. And now if we apply this line, now one of the reasons why it's upside down is it has to do with the way I draw the line. If I draw the line up versus down, all right, so draw it up. And it's getting some distortion. Let's go ahead and double click on that, because some of the options that we put in here. So if we were to change this back to 100%, take a look at the preview, oh, we don't quite see it, but go ahead and apply to stroke, and you can start seeing some different changes in here. We could also try some things like flip across, and you can see how it's changing the direction based on how you set it up. Okay, well that's fun. Now, one other note I want to show you is if I brought in this option, this one has a gradient on it, this flower. I'm going to bring this in, and when I bring it in, let's bring this again as a scatter brush. I'm getting this warning that I'm not able to bring it in. And there are a few features that can't be brought in, gradients and blends and other brush strokes. If you have some mesh objects, or if you have bitmap images, graphs, those are things that aren't able to turn into brushes. So there's some information about that and help the specifics. But if you get that warning, probably somewhere in your artwork you have something that has one of those features just not allowed. And so if I were to go ahead and change this to, let's say, a full color, and just for fun we'll put a stroke on that. Okay, now I can pull that in, and I could create a new scatter brush or even an art brush if I wanted to. But it'd be better as a scatter brush, because as an art brush it's intended to stretch things. And so now just apply it, and there we go. Now when we were dragging them in, we couldn't create a calligraphic brush or a bristle brush, but you can do that by clicking on the new brush option, or by going to the panel menu and creating a new brush. And here's where you can create a calligraphic brush or bristle brush as well. And so I can create something that's going to have some fun options. Here's my angle, and I'm going to round it and maybe put a little bit of a small size. And that, what I like about this is making it look more like a pen as I'm drawing. And I can even add a little bit of change in here. So as I'm drawing this, it's going to vary, and again it gets it sort of a natural look. And I could just give it a generic name like calligraphic brush 1. But when I go ahead and apply that brush, you can see the option. It's, again, I'm getting like a variable width of that feature, and I could always double click and edit it. You can also create brushes by duplicating them. So instead of just doing a new brush, I could take an existing brush and drag it onto the new option. And now I've got a second version of this brush, and I could double click on it, mop copy, and I could make some changes to that brush depending on how I wanted to change the options. And you can start seeing how it's changing a little bit about the type of brush. What kind of brush do you want to use? And you can start creating your effects, have your options in there, and build them. Now, as you start building these brushes, they're going to be stored with this document. But when you create a new document, the brushes get reset. And they can even be a little different if it's a web-based document versus a print-based document. So the next question is, how do you store these as your own library? Well, first of all, there's an option to save brushes. And when you click on Save Brushes, you're able to save the brushes as a file. Now, what I'm seeing right here is a path that Adobe has chosen. This is actually when you first install Adobe products. It gets put in there, for example, in the Windows, it's put somewhere in the program files. And this makes it easier for Adobe to find them. However, if you want to put it somewhere else, you could. You could put it in the My Documents folder, you just navigate through. And then you give it a name. I'm going to cancel that out. And if you wanted to load a brush, you'd simply go to Other Libraries. And again, Adobe's going to default to that path. It is sort of varied down there. It can be in a very strange place, but Adobe knows where it is. Or you would simply navigate to where you stored it, for example, the Documents folder, and you'd open that up. This is also a way that you can save brushes or share brushes with other people. And that brings us up to another tool. I'm going to go to the internet here. I've got this website, which is actually the Illustrator Exchange. And if you did a search for Illustrator Exchange or Exchange Studio, you're going to find an option for Adobe Illustrator Exchange. And there's also other products, Adobe products, that let you do that. But you tap into a community of people who are building things that you can download. And if I were to do something for brushes, I could actually get a different search, and I could find some different brushes in here that I could access. And some of the brushes are going to be free downloads. And some of the brushes you're going to purchase, and it just depends on what you are getting, right? But that's a really nice feature that you can take advantage of, and you could even upload your brushes to that community as well and share them there. But what you have are a lot of options to customize the brush options, create your own brushes, your own artwork into brushes, and then save them as a library that you can reuse in other projects.